Tonight we set our sails not for a sea of water, but for a sea of sand. We're leaving behind the familiar and stepping into the boundless, shimmering expanse of the Sahara, the largest hot desert on Earth. You can almost feel the dry heat press against your skin already, can't you? This journey isn't for the faint of heart. It's a 3-month trek across a landscape so hostile that survival itself is a monumental achievement. Truth be told, without the right knowledge, company, and a staggering amount of luck, you probably won't survive this. Yet, for centuries, people did much more than survive here. They built an empire of commerce upon these dunes, guided by the stars and fueled by a profound human need. They traded gold, ivory, and slaves, but the humble, essential currency of life that anchored it all was salt. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you must do is unlearn the map in your mind. You're not looking at a barren, brown wasteland dividing North Africa from the rest of the continent. You're looking at an ocean. A deep, dry, shimmering ocean of sand, stone, and scorching wind. This is the fundamental truth that every successful trans-Saharan merchant internalized before taking a single step. The Sahara wasn't a barrier, it was a passage. A terrifying, deadly passage, yes, but one that could be navigated with the right vessel. And for this particular ocean, the vessel wasn't made of wood and sailcloth. It was made of flesh, bone, and legendary stubbornness. So, you meet your ship. It blinks at you with long, luxurious eyelashes designed to keep out the sand, then lets out a groan that seems to vibrate from the depths of its soul. It is a dromedary camel, and it is profoundly unimpressed with you. Historians widely accept that the introduction of the domesticated camel from Arabia around the 3rd century AD was the technological revolution that made regular trans-Saharan trade possible. Before camels, attempts to cross were limited and perilous, using horse-drawn chariots along known riverbeds, the ancient chariot routes you might see mentioned on maps, which were more for local raiding than for hauling tons of cargo. The camel changed everything. Let's appreciate this biological marvel for a moment, because your life will depend on it. Those feet are wide, spongy pads that prevent it from sinking into the sand, like a pair of all-terrain sneakers built by evolution. Its hump isn't a water tank, it's a fat reserve, a concentrated lunchbox that allows it to travel for weeks without food. It can lose up to 25% of its body weight in water without suffering, while you'd be a desiccated husk after losing just 12%. It can close its nostrils during sandstorms. It reabsorbs moisture from its own breath. It is, frankly, showing off. And it knows it. The camel is less a beast of burden and more a highly specialized desert survival machine that tolerates you hanging bags on it. You'll learn quickly that you don't command a camel. You negotiate with it. It will roar, spit, and refuse to rise if it senses incompetence. Loading it is a precise art. An unbalanced load means a sore back, a prone camel, and a very long day for everyone. But once it's up and moving, it enters a rolling, hypnotic gait that can cover 25 miles in a day, carrying 300 pounds without complaint. It moves with a serene, plodding certainty, a walking metronome setting the pace for the entire caravan. You are not the master here. You are a passenger on a living ship, and the desert is its native sea. And here's your first lesser-known detail to tuck away, that iconic, haughty expression. There's a reason for it. A camel's mouth is a landscape of pure chaos. Its leathery lips are tough enough to chew through thorny desert plants, and inside, its cheeks are lined with conical, fleshy papillae that point backward toward its throat. These aren't for taste, they are for management. They guide every mouthful of tough, spiny forage inexorably down, making it impossible for the camel to spit anything out. So when it seems to be working its mouth thoughtfully, judging your life choices, it's probably just trying to maneuver a particularly stubborn acacia thorn. It's not contemplating philosophy, it's dealing with a mouthful of nails it can't spit out. You, meanwhile, are just the weird, hairless creature following it around. This partnership between human and camel created a new geography. Routes weren't drawn by rivers or mountain passes, but by a chain of known wells, grazing spots, and navigable terrain between them, the desert's ports. The camel was the engine that connected the salt mines of the northern desert to the gold fields of the southern savanna. It turned isolated oases into bustling hubs and made the idea of a Saharan economy not just a dream, but a sustained, grueling reality. Of course, historians still argue whether the camel's adoption was a slow, organic process driven by Berber tribes, or a more rapid, deliberate spread fueled by the economic ambitions of rising empires who saw the potential to bridge two worlds. Whatever the catalyst, the result was the same: the desert became a highway. So, as you stand there, feeling the first grains of Saharan sand trickle into your sandals, you understand the new rules. You are a sailor. This is your ocean. And that sighing, groaning creature before you, currently depositing a large, steaming commentary on the ground, is your only ticket across. So, you have your ocean, and you have your ship. But you don't own it. In this maritime venture, you're less a ship's captain and more like a tourist renting a scooter from a local who knows all the potholes. A very large, bad-tempered, desert-crossing scooter. You are a merchant, likely from a North African city like Sijilmasa or a Mediterranean port. Your cargo is bundles of manufactured goods, glass beads from Venice, fine textiles from Egypt, brass vessels, and perhaps some horses. Your destination is the gold-bearing lands south of the desert. Your capital is tied up in these goods. You don't have the expertise, the time, or the tribal connections to maintain a herd of camels. That is the domain of the true lords of the desert, the Berber nomads. You find them not in a city, but at its dusty fringe, where the last patch of irrigated green surrenders to the tan expanse. Their encampment is a symphony of practicality: goat hair tents that can be packed in an hour, herds of goats and sheep, and the camels. Always the camels. These are the Imazayan, the free people, the Tuareg, the Sanhaja. Their wealth isn't in coins in a vault, but in livestock and, more importantly, in knowledge. They know where the hidden wells are, the ones not on any crude map. They know how to read the stars for navigation and the wind for weather. They know which canyon hides a bandit ambush and which dune field is impassable after a rare rain. You need them. They, tolerantly, need your business. The negotiation is a ritual of patience, conducted over small, sweet cups of tea. You don't just hire a camel, you hire an ecosystem. You contract with a tribal group for a kafila, a caravan. They provide the camels, the handlers, the guides, the guards, and the social passport. Their presence and their tribal insignia are your best protection against other raiding nomads. It's a form of desert diplomatic immunity. The price is steep, often a share of your eventual profits or a hefty upfront fee in silver. But it's the only way. The widely accepted historical fact here is that the Trans-Saharan trade was not a free-for-all of individual explorers. It was a highly organized, symbiotic enterprise between sedentary merchant communities and nomadic pastoralist tribes. One had the goods and the market connections, the other had the flawless desert logistics. You watch as your goods are assessed, not for their market value, but for their packability. A Berber handler, his face shaded by the indigo tegelmus that will stain his skin blue, tests the weight of a bale of cloth and grunts. He's calculating the load for each animal, balancing left and right, ensuring nothing will chafe over 1,500 miles of swaying travel. The camels are being prepared, too. Their burdens aren't just physical. Each will carry the hopes, investments, and survival chances of a dozen men. And now for a surprising, slightly amusing detail of this process. The camel's pedigree matters. Not in a snobbish, royal lineage way, but in a brutally practical one. The Berbers could, and did, selectively breed camels for specific traits. Some lines were famous for their endurance, able to go longer between water stops. Others were prized for their strength and ability to carry heavier slabs of salt. But some were known for their speed. The Mahari was a lighter, racing-bred camel used by scouts and messengers. Think of it as the desert's Pony Express. There are accounts of elite Mahari riders covering up to 80 miles in a single day, carrying urgent news or scouting the path ahead for the lumbering commercial caravan. So, while your cargo plods along on the draft camels, somewhere out ahead, a nobleman's letter or a vital market price is zooming across the dunes on a lean, long-legged biological motorcycle. The caravan that forms is a small, temporary city on the move. It can number from 100 to 1,000 camels, sometimes more for safety. Alongside you are other merchants, their fates now intertwined with yours. There are the Berber handlers, the true masters of the journey. There will be slaves, tasked with the brutal daily chores of fetching water, gathering firewood, a near impossible task in many stretches, and unloading the camels. There are Islamic scholars and holy men, traveling to spread their faith or to study in the famed libraries of Timbuktu. The caravan is a microcosm, a bubble of society and economy slowly drifting across the sand sea. Historians still argue whether the relationship between the merchant and the nomad was one of pure economic symbiosis or one of tense, controlled dependency. Did the merchants hold the power through their control of capital and global markets? Or did the nomads, as the indispensable gatekeepers of the passage, ultimately call the shots, extracting tolls and fees that kept the merchants perpetually in their debt? The truth likely lived in the middle, in each negotiated contract over bitter tea. But as the last of your goods are secured with intricate knots that won't slip, and the head handler gives a sharp whistle, the balance of power feels clear. You are entering their world now. You are a passenger on their terms. The great, groaning, smelly, magnificent kafila is ready, and the desert awaits its slow, deliberate consumption. With the caravan assembled, a final, critical decision looms. Who will lead this crawling city into the abyss? You don't vote on it. You don't draw straws. The role is inherited, earned, and unquestioned. You meet the Kabe, the caravan master. He is almost certainly a Berber, from a lineage of guides. His face is a road map of the desert itself, etched with lines from squinting into sun-bleached distances and nights spent tracing stars. He doesn't smile at you. He assesses you, your goods, your camels, and calculates you as one more variable in a complex equation of survival. Your life, and the fortune strapped to these grumbling beasts, now rests entirely on the geography stored in his mind. His authority is absolute. He decides the hour of departure, based on winds and omens you cannot perceive. He sets the punishing pace. Too fast, and you exhaust the camels and men. Too slow, and you run out of water before the next well. He chooses the route, which is not a single path but a fluid choice between known points, shifting with the season, recent raids, and the condition of the wells. To you, one dune looks exactly like the last 10,000. To him, a slight variation in the sand's texture, the angle of a wind-sculpted ridge, or the presence of a specific, tiny desert plant is a signpost. He is navigating a featureless ocean by reading the waves. Your days fall into a rhythm dictated by his calls. You rise in the deep cold of the pre-dawn, a chill so sharp it feels like the desert is inhaling all the day's stored heat. You break camp in darkness, the only sounds the soft snorting of camels and the clink of tackle. You march as the sun rises, a blazing coin that quickly turns the world into a furnace. The Kabe rides at the front, often on a lighter mahari, his posture a statue of vigilance. He is watching for the signs. Not just geographical ones, but for the condition of the caravan. A camel favoring a leg. A merchant looking faint. The subtle shift in wind that might foretell a kamsin, a punishing sandstorm. The widely accepted historical fact of the caravan master's role is that he operated on a blend of empirical knowledge and sacred trust. He was a scientist of the desert, but also a spiritual figure. The success of the journey was seen as dependent on both his skill and the will of God. He would lead prayers at the appointed times, the entire caravan halting to face Mecca in the endless sand. His decisions were rarely questioned, for to question him was to question the only thread tethering you to life. Now, for a lesser-known detail about this hellish travel, the navigation itself. You might imagine a map or a compass. They had neither in any form we'd recognize. The compass was useless when your destination was generally south. Their primary tool was the sun and the stars, but for fine daytime navigation, they used the camels themselves. A practiced guide knew that a healthy, unburdened camel, left to its own devices, will walk a remarkably straight line. They would often use a guide camel, unleashing it to walk ahead, and simply follow its unwavering instinctual path for miles. At night, they relied on stellar azimuths, using the rising and setting points of certain stars, a knowledge passed down orally through generations. It was a living, embodied GPS, with the night sky as its satellite array and a disgruntled dromedary as its steering mechanism. And every decision the Kabe made was a gamble with your lives. Historians still argue whether the legendary caravan of 1,000 camels was a routine reality or a rare, majestic exception. Some scholars point to the organizational genius and wealth of empires like Mali or the Almoravids being able to muster such vast trains. Others contend that most caravans were far smaller, a few hundred camels at most, because the logistics of water and fodder for 1,000 beasts at a single, often tiny, well was a nightmare of biblical proportions. Was the 1,000-camel caravan the standard trading vessel, or the equivalent of a modern supertanker, a spectacular, risky, and infrequent event? Your Kabir likely didn't care about the debate. His concern was the next well. Was it still sweet, or had it been fouled by a dead animal? Had a rival tribe filled it with sand? You learned to read his moods. A slight relaxation in his shoulders as he spots a specific rock formation means the next well is near, and it's good. A prolonged, silent scan of the horizon with his hand shielding his eyes sends a chill through the entire line. That is the look that precedes a change of course, adding days to the journey to avoid an unseen threat. In those moments, you understand the true transaction. You paid for camels and protection. But what you truly bought was the contents of this man's memory. The location of a seep of water under a flat stone, the safe passage through a field of razor-sharp flint, the ghostly trail that leads to salvation. He is not just your captain. He is the library, the compass, and the lifeboat, all in one weary, sun-hardened man. And as he points a hand towards a horizon that looks no different from any other, you urge your camel forward, trusting that the map inside his skull is clearer than the one under your feet. After days that blend into a single, sun-hammered memory of dust and thirst, the world finally breaks its own rules. Where there should be only beige and blue, a smudge of impossible green appears on the horizon. At first, you think it's a mirage, a cruel trick of the heat haze. But as the caravan's pace subtly quickens, a collective sigh seems to pass through the line of camels and men. The oasis is real. This isn't just a stop, it's a reprieve. It's a truck stop, a trading post, a hospital, and a gossip hub, all built around the miracle of water bubbling up from the deep heart of the desert. You approach through a grove of date palms, their fronds rustling with a sound so lush it feels like a physical coolness. The air changes, carrying the smell of damp earth and blooming henna. The centerpiece is the spring or the well, often surrounded by a low stone wall and shaded by ancient trees. This is the engine of the oasis. The widely accepted historical fact is that these oases were not random accidents, but often the reason towns and cities existed in the first place. Settlements like Ghadames, Tadmeka, or Wardain were not just way stations. They were sophisticated hubs with permanent populations of farmers, artisans, and traders who managed the precious water through complex irrigation channels called kanats or fogras, tunneling life through the stone. Your caravan spills into the open area around the water, a scene of controlled chaos. The Kabe barks orders, establishing the order of drinking. The camels go first. They are the engines, and without them, everyone dies. They are led to troughs, drinking with deep, gulping swallows that go on for minutes. Then the humans, cupping the cool water in their hands, drinking not just to quench thirst but to remember what it feels like to be truly satiated. Slaves fill enormous water skins made of goat hide, the leather swelling and becoming heavier, the caravan's lifeblood for the next leg. While the practicalities of refueling unfold, the oasis reveals its other life. Around the central water source, a market materializes. It's not a grand souk, but a vital, makeshift exchange. Local farmers sell baskets of fresh dates, lemons, and pomegranates grown in shaded gardens, a taste of shocking sweetness after a diet of dried meat and hard biscuit. Herders offer goats or sheep for slaughter, providing fresh meat for a feast that night. Craftsmen sell or repair leather goods, sandals, and baskets. Here, you might hear news. A merchant from the south, heading north, shares rumors of a king's death in Mali that will affect gold prices. A pilgrim from the east tells of instability in Egypt that might make Mediterranean goods more expensive. The oasis is the desert's internet, a node where data packets of gossip, prices, and politics are uploaded and downloaded. And here is your surprising, slightly amusing oasis detail: the date palm. It wasn't just food. It was the hardware store and the construction crew. Its trunk provided timber. Its fronds were woven into walls, roofs, mats, and baskets. Its fibers became rope. But the most ingenious use was in the maintenance of the wells themselves. The pits of these wells could be deep, and their sides prone to collapse. Oasis dwellers would take the long, flexible ribs of the date palm frond and weave them into massive, cylindrical casings that were lowered into the well shaft to hold back the sand, a biodegradable, renewable well liner. Every part of the tree served a purpose, making the date palm the ultimate symbol of sustainable desert living long before the term was invented. For you, the merchant, the oasis is also a place of finance. This is where you might meet a representative of the Siftaja system. Need to send profit back north without carrying gold through bandit country? You could use a primitive but effective letter of credit. You pay a trusted merchant banker here in the oasis, and he gives you a coded letter. You carry only this paper to, say, Sijilmasa, where his business partner, upon seeing the code and verifying your identity, pays you the equivalent sum. It was a system built on trust and reputation across 1,000 miles, a nervous system of finance that pulsed along the caravan routes. Historians still argue whether this system was a purely Islamic financial innovation that spread with the trade, or an adaptation of much older, pre-existing Mediterranean or Middle Eastern practices that were perfectly suited to the Sahara's dangers. Whatever its origin, it meant your wealth could travel faster and safer than your body ever could. As night falls, the atmosphere shifts. The urgent work is done. Fires are lit, and the smell of roasting meat and stewing grain fills the air. Stories are exchanged, not just merchant talk, but tales of jinn in the deep desert, of lost cities of gold, of caravans that vanished. Music might start, a simple reed flute or the beat of a drum, a sound that seems to hold the vast silence of the desert at bay. For this one night, you are not in a hostile void. You are in a bubble of community, of laughter, of full bellies. You sleep on solid ground under real trees, listening to the whisper of leaves instead of the moan of wind over dunes. But as you drift off, you know this is a loan, not a gift. The desert has allowed this. Tomorrow, it will demand repayment in miles. The respite of the oasis is a fading dream, a lingering taste of date on your tongue as you face the inevitable. The caravan reforms, waterskins bulging, camels restocked with fodder. The khabir sets a determined pace. You are heading for the edge, the final frontier of the known world before the true crossing begins. Your destination is Sijilmasa, less a city in the traditional sense and more of a concept made of mud brick and ambition, the Great Northern Gateway. It is the last place where everything is easy, and the first place where you must commit. As you approach, the landscape tells the story. The scrubland gives way to more organized greenery, vast orchards and palm groves fed by the waters of the Ouzes River. Then the walls rise, towering structures of rammed earth that glow golden in the sun. Sijilmasa isn't just a stop, it's a factory for producing desert-ready expeditions. The air here buzzes with a different energy than the quiet oasis. It's the clamor of final preparation, the metallic ring of blacksmiths, the shouts of waymasters, and the polyglot murmur of a dozen languages: Berber, Arabic, Songhai, even snippets of Mediterranean tongues. You pass through the colossal gates, paying a toll to the city guard, a tax that funds the Sultan's coffers and the maintenance of the very roads you're about to abandon. Inside, the streets are narrow canyons, shaded and crowded. Every doorway seems to lead to a specialist. Here is the saddler, reinforcing camel pads with extra wool for the long haul. There is the waterskin maker, testing seams by filling them and hanging them in the sun, watching for the faintest darkening leak. The widely accepted historical fact about Sijilmasa, and gateways like it, is that they were paramount to state power. Controlling Sijilmasa meant controlling the tap of Trans-Saharan wealth. The Almoravid and later the Marinid dynasties fought bitterly for it, not for the city itself, but for the right to tax every ounce of salt heading south and every speck of gold heading north. The city was a customs house, a bank, and a military garrison rolled into one. Your own preparations become surgical. You visit a money changer in the Funduq, a fortified inn for merchants. You convert your remaining dinars or dirhams into small, rough gold dust or cowrie shells, the currency of the south. Coins are too heavy and mean little in the lands beyond the desert. You make final purchases: sacks of barley meal for the journey, blocks of hard sugar, extra ropes, and spare leather thongs. You might hire an additional personal guard, a grim-faced man whose eyes constantly scan crowds, a local expert in the very human threats of the road ahead. And here is a lesser-known, practical detail of Sijilmasa's final checks: the camel audit. It wasn't just about having a camel, it was about having the right camel for the next, most brutal leg. Specialist veterinarians, paid by the merchant guilds, would inspect the rental beasts. They would check the wear on the footpads, the condition of the teeth. A camel with bad teeth can't graze efficiently on tough desert plants. And the firmness of the hump, a soft, floppy hump meant the animal hadn't been fattened properly and would falter early. A camel rejected here meant a last-minute, expensive scramble to find a replacement. It was a quality control checkpoint, ensuring the biological machinery of the trade was up to code. This is also where you feel the first true weight of what you're leaving behind. Sijilmasa is the end of the Islamic world as the Mediterranean knows it. Beyond its southern gate lies the Bilad al-Sudan, the land of the blacks, a place of mystery, immense wealth, and, in the minds of many northern merchants, cultural otherness. You attend a final sermon at the Great Mosque, praying for safety. You write last letters to family, entrusted to a postal rider on a swift Mahari who will take the coastal route back north. The atmosphere is a cocktail of excitement and solemn dread. Historians still argue whether Sijilmas's primary identity was as a bustling, cosmopolitan merchant metropolis or as a fortified military outpost projecting power into the void. Was it a bridge, or a wall with a very expensive gate in it? The answer likely changed with each sultan and each trading season. For you, on the eve of departure, it feels like both, the last solid piece of the world, from which you are about to jump. On the final morning, the caravan gathers not inside the city, but in a vast field beyond its southern wall. The scale is now apparent. Hundreds of camels kneel in rows, being loaded with a precision that looks like chaos but is in fact a well-drilled ritual. The Kabe moves among them, a general inspecting his troops. You take one last look back at the high walls of Sijilmasa, glowing in the dawn light. They represent law, order, and a world where water comes from wells, not miracles. You turn your face south. Ahead, the land rises into rocky, desolate foothills, the prelude to the ocean of sand. The green is gone. The comfort is gone. All that remains is the caravan, the Kabe's knowledge, and the deal you've made with the desert. The gate, both literal and metaphorical, closes behind you. The crossing has begun. The world bleaches. The rocky foothills give way to an expanse of gravel plains, which then dissolve into the true sand sea, an endless, rolling topography of gold and white under a blinding cerulean bowl. The heat is no longer an element. It is the medium you move through, thick and heavy. Days pass in this monotony, a hypnotic rhythm of swaying camels and the crunch of sand. Then, the Kabe points. On the horizon, something glitters. Not the shimmer of a mirage, but a sharp, crystalline whiteness. As you draw closer, a surreal sight resolves. A city, but one seemingly built from ice or sugar in the middle of hell. This is Tagaza. The salt mines. There are no palm trees here. No greenery. No visible source of water. Tagaza exists for one reason. It sits atop a vast, shallow seam of pure rock salt. The city is literally built from the commodity it extracts. The houses are low blocks of salt bricks, mortared with a slurry of salt and sand. The central mosque is built of salt. The defensive walls are salt. It is a place where you can lick the walls of your own lodgings, though you wouldn't, as it would be a tragic waste of the very product that drew you here. The widely accepted historical fact about Tagaza is its stark, brutal functionality. It was an industrial camp, not a true city. It produced nothing but salt. Every single thing needed to sustain life, water, food, wood, textiles, had to be caravanned in across hundreds of miles of desert. A slab of salt here was worth less than a cup of water. You are greeted not by merchants, but by miners. They are a separate, wretched class, often slaves or condemned men sent to work in this inferno. Their existence is a harsh cycle of digging under the savage sun, cutting the salt into manageable slabs with axes and picks, and waiting for the caravans that are their only link to the world. The air is filled with a fine, bitter dust that coats everything, your skin, your lips, the inside of your throat. The constant glare from the white salt and sand is blinding, and many miners suffer from early blindness. It is a vision of purgatory, a place where the earth's bounty is extracted at the most terrible human cost. Your business is swift and somber. You negotiate with the overseers, who represent distant Saharan lords or the Sultan himself. The salt is cut into standardized slabs, roughly the size of a large paving stone and as thick as your hand. Each one is smoothed and shaped for transport. The value is not yet in its monetary worth, but in its weight and integrity. A slab that cracks in transit is a loss. Historians still argue whether Tagaza was primarily controlled by the Berber nomads of the region, like the powerful Masufa tribe, or whether it was a royal monopoly of empires like Mali, who would send expeditions north to secure the vital resource. The truth may have swayed with the political winds of the desert, but the miners' lot likely never changed. Now, for a surprising and grimly amusing detail about life in this salt hell: the currency. With no agriculture and no manufacturing, the miners needed to buy the vital supplies brought by caravans. But they had no gold, and salt was their only product. So, they used salt as currency in the salt mine. A fascinating, absurd economy developed. A caravan arrives with a load of dates from the north. The miners would pay for the dates with smaller pieces of salt. You would literally trade salt for goods while standing on a mountain of it. A cup of water might cost a sliver of salt the size of your thumb. It was a closed-loop, meta-economy that perfectly illustrated the brutal logistics of the place. The very thing being mined was the only means to procure the tools needed to continue mining it. You walk through the mining pits, great open scars in the white earth. The work is relentless. The salt is pried up in sheets from the basin of an ancient, evaporated sea. There is no shade. The miners, their bodies coated in white dust, move like ghosts. They are the silent, suffering engine of the entire Trans-Saharan economy. The gold of Mali glittered in royal crowns, but it was purchased with the sweat and sight of the men of Tagaza. The contrast couldn't be starker. You, the merchant, are here to conduct a transaction that will make you wealthy in a far-off green land. They are here because they have no other choice, their world bounded by this blinding white prison. As you finalize your purchase, you feel no excitement, only a sober calculation. This salt, hewn by condemned hands in the most desolate spot you have ever seen, is now your responsibility. It must be transformed, through sheer miles of effort, into value. You leave Tagaza without looking back, eager to be free of its eerie, lifeless glare. The caravan, now laden with its blinding white cargo, turns south. You carry the desert's bones, and you must now deliver them to where they will be given life. The business at Tagaza is clinical, but the work that follows is pure, unadulterated physics. You are now the owner of a small fortune in inert, crystalline potential. But potential doesn't cross a desert, weight does. The caravan shifts from a traveling party to a loading dock. The camels, which had been relieved of their northern goods, now stand impatient, grumbling lines as the central, brutal task begins, transforming raw salt slabs into a mobile cargo. The Kabi and the lead handlers direct a ballet of burden. The salt slabs are heavy, each one weighing as much as a small person. They cannot be simply tossed into a sack. They must be packed. The goal is to create a balanced, secure load that sits comfortably on the camel's back for months, that won't shift and cause a sore, that won't crack from uneven pressure. It starts with the saddle, a wooden frame padded with thick felt and woven wool. This is placed over the camel's hump, and the beast bellows its protest, a deep, guttural sound of profound inconvenience. Then, the weighing. A large, crude balance scale is set up. On one side, a stone weight. On the other, a salt slab. The goal is to create matched pairs of nearly identical weight. These pairs will be hung on either side of the camel, left and right, to keep the load even. A handler hefts a slab, judges it, and calls out a number. Another handler searches the pile for its twin. It's a dusty, muscle-straining puzzle. The widely accepted historical fact of this process is its standardization. The salt slab became a unit of account. In markets like Timbuktu or Jen, prices for other goods were sometimes quoted in slabs of salt. It was a bulky currency, but a universally understood one. The very act of loading here in Tagaza was the minting of that currency. You help, because everyone helps. You feel the shocking density of the salt as you lift one corner of a slab. It's not like stone, It's colder, smoother, with a deadly heft. The dust gets into every crease of your skin, stinging in sweat. The handlers work with an efficiency born of 1,000 repetitions. They use thick ropes of camel hair, looping them around the slabs in a series of knots that look complex but are designed for quick release at the journey's end. 2 matched slabs are tied together with a wooden spacer between them, creating a rigid unit. Then, with a synchronized heave and swing, 2 men lift this unit and hang it over the saddle frame. The camel groans, its body settling under the new weight. And here's your lesser-known, slightly absurd loading detail: the camel's opinion. Camels are not passive participants. A camel that decides it does not approve of its load will simply refuse to rise. Or worse, it will rise awkwardly and then deliberately collapse, risking injury to itself and destruction of the precious salt. The handlers have tricks. They might cover the camel's head with a cloth to calm it. They might sing or chant in a low, rhythmic tone. Sometimes, a stubborn camel requires a more direct negotiation. A handler will bite the camel's ear. Not hard enough to injure, but enough to deliver a sharp, surprising stimulus that distracts it from its protest long enough for the command to stand to take effect. It's a moment of interspecies diplomacy where the final argument is a gentle nip. Once the main salt loads are secured, the remaining space on the saddle frame is packed with the merchant's personal goods, your textiles, beads, or brassware, wrapped in leather against the dust. Finally, a large, decorated woolen blanket, often brightly colored with geometric Berber designs, is thrown over the entire load and tied down tightly. This is the akef, serving as both protection from the sun and a statement of identity. From a distance, a loaded caravan is a slow-moving gallery of woven art. Historians still argue whether the famous salt for its weight in gold exchange was a literal, everyday occurrence or a proverbial expression of ultimate value. Was a standard slab of Tagaza salt always worth its exact weight in gold dust in the markets of the South? Or was that the ideal, the maximum price under perfect conditions, with actual haggling and market fluctuations causing the ratio to vary? The men loading these slabs certainly acted as if they were handling gold itself, with a care that bordered on reverence. Each one represented the profit margin, the reason for the entire ordeal. Finally, the last knot is tied. The last camel is coaxed to its feet, swaying slightly as it adjusts to the new center of gravity. The caravan is transformed. It was a line of travelers. Now it is a crawling treasury. The white slabs gleam in the sun, a procession of mineral wealth drawn from the earth's driest wound. The Kabe gives the signal. A chorus of clicks and calls moves down the line. One by one, the camels step forward. The load creaks. The salt, asleep in the desert for eons, is now in motion, beginning its long, deliberate journey to become something else entirely. With the salt secured, the caravan pushes south from Tagaza, and the true character of the journey reveals itself. It is no longer about preparation or loading, it is about endurance in the face of a silent, multifaceted threat. The desert is not passively empty, it is actively hostile. The first danger is the one you can see coming, or rather, the ones who see you coming, bandits. The Kabe is perpetually scanning the horizon, not for landmarks, but for the telltale signs of a gazu, a raid. A distant, unmoving speck that shouldn't be there. A flicker of movement along a ridge line. The desert tribes, especially those not benefiting from the caravan tolls or rental fees, saw the lumbering kafila as the ultimate prize. A successful raid could yield salt, goods, camels, and slaves in one package. The caravan's best defense is its size and its hired Berber guards, whose reputation for ferocity is a deterrent in itself. But sometimes, deterrence fails. The guards, riding lighter, faster camels, form a screen around the main column. If a raid comes, It will be a sudden, screaming chaos of dust and blades, a violent tax levied by the desert itself. Your life depends on the men you hired back in Sijilmasa. But the human threat is almost a relief compared to the psychological one. You are crossing the Majabat al-Kubra, the great emptiness. For weeks, you see nothing but repetitive waves of sand under a sky of unbearable blue. The silence is profound, broken only by the wind and the creak of saddles. In this void, the mind turns against itself. This is where the tales of the jinn feel most real. The desert jinn are not wish-granting genies. They are malignant spirits of place, tricksters who lead travelers astray. They create mirages not just of water, but of entire caravans moving parallel to yours, luring you off course. They whisper in the wind. The widely accepted historical fact is that the mental toll of the crossing was as real as the physical one. Caravan guides and travelers' accounts are filled with warnings about these spiritual dangers, and rituals, reciting specific verses from the Quran, wearing protective amulets, avoiding travel at certain haunted hours, was standard practice. The line between navigation and spiritual protection was blurred. And then there is the desert's own body. The sandstorm, or Kamsin. It announces itself with a distant rumble, a brownish haze on the horizon that swallows the light. The Kabe barks urgent orders. The caravan must halt immediately. The camels are forced to kneel, facing away from the approaching storm. You dismount and huddle against your camel's side, wrapping your entire head in your robe, using the animal as a living windbreak. Then it hits. The world dissolves into a roaring, stinging brown madness. Sand infiltrates everything, your mouth, your nose, your sealed bags. It scours exposed skin. You breathe in grit. For hours, you exist in a loud, dark, suffocating tunnel. When it passes, the landscape is remade. Dunes have moved. Tracks are erased. The Kabur's first job is to reorient himself in a world he no longer recognizes. Now, for a surprising and practical detail of survival in this realm, the use of animal byproducts. You've run out of the precious citrus fruits from the last oasis that helped stave off scurvy. Your lips are cracked, your skin is burning. The desert sun reflects off the salt and sand, doubling its assault. What do? You might resort to a sunscreen and lip balm used by the nomadic guides, a paste made from rancid butter or camel fat, mixed with ashes or ochre clay. And for severe chafing from the constant riding, a poultice made from dried camel dung, powdered and mixed with a little water. It's not glamorous, but it has antiseptic properties and provides a barrier. Survival here isn't about elegance, it's about using every single resource, no matter how humble or unappealing. Historians still argue whether the greatest number of casualties on the route came from direct violence, thirst, or simply getting lost. Was it the bandit's spear, the dry well, or the decision at a fork in a wadi that led a smaller group to wander until their water ran out? The records are silent on the countless small disappearances. A camel stumbles, breaks a leg, and is butchered for its meat and water-filled stomach. A merchant, driven mad by the silence and heat, walks away from the caravan into the dunes and is never seen again. The desert consumes in many ways. You learn to listen to a new language, the language of absence. The absence of bird song. The absence of insects. The absence of any scent but dust and hot stone. In that absence, every small sound your body makes, the beat of your own heart, the rasp of your breath, becomes amplified. You live inside your own head for weeks on end, with only the swaying back of a camel and the blinding white slabs of salt for company. The threat isn't always a dramatic raid or storm. Sometimes, it's the slow, silent sip of your sanity, evaporating into the dry air. You cling to the routine, to the prayers at dawn and dusk, to the sight of the man in front of you, to the profound, stubborn plod of the camels. They, at least, seem to understand the desert. You are just a fragile passenger, moving through a land that tolerates your passage, but never welcomes it. The change is so gradual you almost miss its beginning. The relentless, blinding gold of the sand begins to dull, stained with streaks of ochre and brown. The air, once a dry furnace, carries a new sensation, a faint, elusive hint of moisture. The dunes shrink, giving way to hard-packed earth and scattered, thorny acacias that look like ancient, twisted sentinels. Then, one afternoon, after months of a horizon defined by sand, you see it, a smudge of hazy green on the edge of the world. It's not the compact, cultivated green of an oasis. This is a vast, blurred line, a promise of an entirely different biome. The emotion that washes over the caravan is palpable. It starts as a low murmur, then builds into a chorus of voices. Men who have walked in silent endurance for weeks begin to talk, to point, to laugh with a relief that borders on giddiness. The camels, sensing the change, pick up their pace, their nostrils flaring as they catch the scent of living vegetation and distant water on the breeze. You have reached the Sahel, the shore of the great sand sea. You have crossed. The Kaaba allows the first proper celebration since leaving Sijilmasa. That night, the final camp before truly entering the savannah, is a festival. Extra rations are distributed. Perhaps a sheep purchased from a nomadic herder encountered on the fringe is slaughtered. Songs are sung, not the solemn chants of the deep desert, but lively, rhythmic tunes from the south, taught by the guards or the slaves who call this land home. The fear of bandits and storms is behind you. The psychological weight of the great emptiness lifts. You are, for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, in a land that supports life willingly. The next day's travel confirms it. The thorny scrub gives way to tall, golden grasses that whisper against the legs of the camels. Trees become more frequent, offering actual patches of shade. You see birds, real birds, not desert scavengers, flitting between branches. The widely accepted historical fact is that this transition zone, the Sahel, was not just a geographical boundary but a cultural and economic membrane. It was here that the desert-based transport system of the Berbers met the riverine and agricultural networks of the West African kingdoms. It was the interface where the salt of the desert was translated into the gold of the forest. You might encounter the first permanent villages since the oases. These are not like the northern settlements. The houses are round, with conical thatched roofs, built of mud brick. The people are different, their skin darker, their languages musical and unfamiliar. They are farmers, herders of long-horned cattle, and they watch the arrival of the great caravan with a mixture of awe and commercial calculation. Children run alongside the line of camels, their eyes wide at the strange, dusty procession and its glinting white cargo. Here, the salt is no longer just heavy rock, it is a curiosity, a rumor made solid. Its value is about to become real. And here is a lesser-known, sensory detail of this arrival: the sound of water. Not the silent, grudging seep of a desert well, but the living sound of it. Within a day or two of entering the savannah, you hear it, the distant, low rush of a river. It might be the Niger, the Senegal, or one of their mighty tributaries. After months of listening to wind and sand, the sound of moving water is a physical shock, a vibration you feel in your chest. It is the sound of the world refilling itself. The caravan instinctively moves toward it. When you finally crest a rise and see the great, brown ribbon of the river winding through the green, a profound, almost spiritual quiet falls over the men. Many will dismount and walk the final distance, just to feel solid, grassy earth under their feet. This moment of arrival is also a moment of reckoning. The desert crossing was a trial of survival, but now the commercial trial begins. The salt is here, but is the market? Are the political conditions stable? Has another caravan arrived just before you, flooding the market? The carbo's job is nearly done. Soon, you will be on your own, a merchant seeking your fortune in the great trading cities. Historians still argue whether the psychological impact of the crossing forged a unique, pan-Saharan merchant identity, or whether the differences between the North African Arab Berber merchants and the sub-Saharan African traders remained a firm cultural divide, bridged only by commercial interest. Did the shade hell of the desert create a bond, or was it merely a dangerous commute between two separate worlds? For now, such debates don't matter. You are here. You bathe in the river for the first time in months, the silt-laden water feeling like silk on your sun-cured skin. You wash the fine, white dust of Tagaza from your clothes and your soul. You look back north, at the hazy, heat-shimmered line that is the desert's edge. It feels like looking back at a prison you have miraculously escaped. You survived the ocean of sand. Now, you must learn to navigate the new world of rivers, kings, and gold. The river is your new guide. The caravan, still intact but pulsing with a new urgency, follows its course, moving from the open savanna toward the heart of civilization. Your destination materializes as a silhouette against the sky, the city of Jen. From a distance, it seems to rise from the floodplain of the Bani River like a creation of the earth itself, a skyline of towering, pinnacle-topped structures with soft, organic curves, all the color of sun-baked clay. This is the legendary marketplace where the abstract value of your salt becomes tangible, glittering wealth. Entering Jen is an assault on the senses of a different kind. The quiet of the desert is replaced by a cacophony of life. The hum of thousands of voices in the market, the bleating of sheep and goats in pens, the rhythmic pound of pestles in mortars, the call of muezzins from the mosque. And the smells, wood smoke, drying fish, spices, shea butter, and the rich, dank scent of the river mud. The city is built for trade. Its great mosque, the largest mud brick building in the world, is not just a place of worship but a statement of commercial and spiritual power, a beacon for merchants from all points of the compass. You make your way to the Tunjon, the main market square. Here, under a forest of makeshift sunshades, the climactic exchange of the trans-Saharan world takes place. Your salt slabs, carried for 1,000 miles, are finally unloaded and stacked like pale, crystalline ingots. Across from you, merchants from the gold-producing forests to the south have set up their own stations. They do not display gleaming coins or jewelry, but small, sealed leather pouches and delicate brass scales. The widely accepted historical fact of this marketplace is its role as a classic meeting point of complementary economies. The savanna and forest kingdoms had gold and agricultural plenty, but lacked salt, a biological necessity for human and animal health, and for preserving food. The desert had boundless salt, but lacked gold and grain. Jen was the neutral ground where these needs collided with spectacular profitability. The negotiation is a silent, visual ritual. A gold merchant approaches your salt stack. He doesn't speak your language, you don't speak his. He runs a hand over a salt slab, feeling its solidity, checking for cracks or impurities from the journey. He nods, almost imperceptibly. Then, he brings out his scale. He places a salt slab on one brass plate. From his pouch, he pours a stream of fine, dark gold dust onto the opposite plate. The dust is not the bright yellow of purified gold. It is alluvial gold, panned from riverbeds, and has a slightly reddish, earthy hue. Everyone watches. The crowd, which has formed a respectful circle, holds its breath. The scale trembles, then settles. The two plates hang, perfectly level. Salt for its weight in gold. It is not always a perfect one-to-one trade. Haggling happens through gestures and the intervention of a specialized translator merchant. But the principle holds. The value is measured in direct, physical equivalence. Your months of risk, thirst, and fear are crystallized in this moment, as a lump of desert rock balances against a pile of riverbed glitter. You are not paid in coins, but in nature's two most stark forms of condensed value. Now, for a surprising detail of this high-stakes exchange, the currency police. In a marketplace dealing in untraceable gold dust and bulky salt slabs, fraud was a constant threat. The solution was the Maulam ul-Tib, a market official appointed by the city's ruler or the merchant guilds. His job was to ensure the integrity of weights and measures. But he also had a more chemical role. He possessed a set of touchstones, smooth, black basalt slabs, and known samples of pure gold. If a dispute arose over the purity of the gold dust, he would rub a sample on the touchstone, creating a streak, and compare its color to that of the pure sample when treated with specific acids, often nitric acid, traded from the north. It was forensic economics, practiced in the dust of an open-air market, a scientific check on the most primal of trades. After the exchange, the salt's journey is over, but the gold's begins. You carefully transfer the dust into your own stout leather pouches, which are then sewn shut and hidden within your clothing or a secret compartment in your luggage. The salt slab, meanwhile, is hoisted by the local merchant slaves. It will be broken down into smaller pieces and traded inland, where it will eventually be carved into smaller, functional units for cooking or for livestock to lick. The commodity that was a burden becomes a blessing. Historians still argue whether the famed markets of Jen and Timbuktu were truly free, cosmopolitan hubs, or whether they were tightly controlled by the ruling elite of the Mali and later Songhai empires, who taxed every transaction and dictated prices to maximize royal wealth. Was this the vibrant heart of global commerce, or a beautifully staged royal monopoly? You don't dwell on it. You have your gold. The relief is dizzying. You spend some of it immediately, right there in the market, on things you have missed. Fresh fruit, new cotton robes to replace your desert-ravaged clothes, a hot meal you didn't have to reconstitute from dried stores. You feel the weight of the pouches against your body, a comforting, dense presence. The desert took so much from you. Now, in this vibrant, muddy, noisy city on the river, it has given back. The long equation of the journey, suffering for wealth, risk for reward, has finally been solved. You are no longer a traveler. You are, once again, a wealthy man. The trade is complete, the gold pouch is secured. But as you prepare for the long journey back north, you realize the caravan carried more than just salt and cloth. It carried invisible cargo that was, in many ways, more transformative than gold. The Saharan trade routes were not mere commercial pipelines. They were the circulatory system for ideas, faith, and technology, connecting continents of thought. Your journey south was a delivery of goods. Your presence here, now, is part of a delivery of civilization. The most profound of these imports is Islam. You see its mark everywhere in Jen and will see it in Timbuktu. It arrived not with conquering armies, but with merchants like you, and with Berber and Sanhaja scholars who traveled with the caravans. They came peacefully, trading by day and discussing theology by night with local rulers and elites. The appeal was multifaceted. Islam offered a written scripture, the Quran, a connection to a wider, sophisticated world of literacy and law, and a unifying faith that could help administer expanding multi-ethnic empires. The widely accepted historical fact is that the conversion of West African rulers, like the Mali Emperor Mansa Musa, was a gradual process driven by trade and diplomacy, not conquest. The mosque in Jen, which you marveled at, is the ultimate symbol of this, a purely African architectural form built to serve an Abrahamic faith that arrived on camelback. With Islam came literacy. Arabic script became the administrative language of empires like Mali and Songhai. It allowed for record-keeping, diplomacy, and the creation of legal contracts like the siftaja you might have used. But more beautifully, it sparked a literary flourishing. In cities like Timbuktu, vast private libraries were assembled, containing not just religious texts, but works on astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and philosophy from the Arab world and beyond. Young scholars from across West Africa traveled to study there. The desert, a barrier to the weak, became a highway for the intellect. The salt you brought helped purchase the vellum and ink upon which this knowledge was preserved. And then there are the practical technologies. The caravan brought more than goods, it brought techniques. The North African blacksmiths who traveled with caravans or settled in southern towns introduced advanced ironworking skills, improving tool and weapon production. Techniques for digging deeper wells and constructing the sophisticated irrigation systems you saw in the oases were transferred south. Even fashions changed. The tailored, embroidered robes of the north became status symbols for West African nobility, woven into local styles. The exchange was never one way. In return, the north received not just gold, but knowledge of tropical agriculture, medicinal plants unknown in the Mediterranean, and artistic traditions that influenced design. Now, for a lesser-known, delightful detail of this intellectual trade, the humble board game. The caravan routes are credited with spreading the game of Mancala, known by many names like Wari or Oa, across Africa and into the Arab world. This game of counting and strategy, played on a carved wooden board with seeds or stones, was the perfect traveler's pastime, portable, requiring no language, and endlessly complex. It was played in oasis camps, in the courtyards of fundaks, and in royal courts. Through it, not just a game, but a mode of logical thinking and social interaction traveled thousands of miles. A merchant waiting for a market to open might have learned a new, devastating opening move from a Berber guide, and then taught it to a Songhai prince months later. It was a subtle, playful thread in the fabric of cultural exchange. Of course, this blending was not seamless. Historians still argue whether the adoption of Islam and Arabic culture at the elite level created a social divide between the cosmopolitan cities of the trade routes and the rural, animist populations who maintained older traditional beliefs. Was the famed University of Sankore in Timbuktu an engine of enlightened cosmopolitanism, or an exclusive institution that reinforced the power of a merchant scholar class, leaving the majority of the population untouched by its learning? The grand mosques and libraries tell one story, the persistent local spirit shrines and oral traditions tell another. As you pack your new gold-laden bags, you see the evidence of this fusion all around you. The local rulers' guards carry spears with iron tips forged using techniques from the north, while their shields are painted with traditional protective symbols. The legal document recording your sale is written in elegant Arabic script, but witnessed by local elders using traditional seals. You are standing at a confluence, a point where two mighty rivers of culture, one from the desert, one from the forest, have met and mingled, creating something entirely new. You came for salt and gold. Without even intending to, you participated in something far larger, the slow, patient wiring together of a continent. Your gold is secure, the markets buzz a pleasant memory. As you wait for the northbound caravan to form, you hear a story. It's told and retold in the fundaks and tea shops of Jen, a tale so extravagant it has already passed into legend, though it happened within living memory. It is the story of a king whose journey did not involve trade, but faith, and whose wealth was so unimaginable it temporarily broke the economies of the places he visited. They speak of Mansa Musa, the emperor of Mali, and his pilgrimage to Mecca. In 1324, Mansa Musa did not send a caravan, he became one. His entourage was said to number in the tens of thousands, soldiers, officials, slaves, and his entire royal court. But the detail that seizes every merchant's imagination is the gold. He traveled with a baggage train of 100 camels, each carrying 300 pounds of pure gold dust. Not for trade, but for gift-giving and expenditure. He was coming to your world, to Cairo and Mecca, and he intended to announce the majesty of Mali not with threats, but with breathtaking, philanthropic wealth. The widely accepted historical fact of Mansa Musa's Hajj is its documented impact on the Mediterranean world. When his procession reached Cairo, then one of the premier cities of the Islamic world, he and his retinue spent and gave away so much gold so freely that they caused massive inflation. The sudden, enormous influx of gold devalued the currency. The price of goods in Cairo skyrocketed and, according to contemporary historians, did not recover for over a decade. It was an unintentional demonstration of monetary policy on a continental scale. Mansa Musa wasn't trying to destabilize Egypt. He was simply being generous on a scale Egypt couldn't absorb. He literally put Mali on the map. Catalan cartographers, hearing of this golden king, would soon feature a detailed drawing of Mansa Musa, scepter in hand, on their maps of West Africa. As you listen, you try to fathom the logistics. Your own caravan of a few hundred camels was a monumental effort. His was a moving city. The water needed, the fodder, the organization to keep tens of thousands of people alive across the very desert you just crossed, it defies belief. It spoke of an empire of staggering administrative power and resource wealth. His gold did not come from trade with the north. It came from the mines of his own empire, like the famed Bure fields, which poured their yield directly into the royal treasury. Your hard-won pouches of dust were a merchant's profit. His was the source itself, on a casual, world-altering stroll. Now, for a surprising and humanizing detail from this legendary journey, the debt. The story goes that Mansa Musa was so lavishly generous in Cairo that he ran out of spending money on his way back home. He had given away or spent all his gold. So, in a twist of irony that delights every merchant who hears it, the richest man in the world had to take out a loan. He borrowed from Cairo's merchants, using his future royal revenue as collateral. It's a perfect punchline to a story of excess. A reminder that even the treasury of Mali had limits, and that the global economy, once touched, demanded balance. Whether entirely true or neatly metaphorical, it's a tale that places even the mightiest king within the web of credit and trust that bound the commercial world. His pilgrimage had lasting consequences beyond economics. He returned to Mali with scholars, architects, and poets from the Arab world, most notably the Andalusian poet and architect Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, who is credited with designing the iconic Sudano-Sahelian architectural style of mosques like the one in Timbuktu. Mansa Musa used his newfound fame and connections to turbocharge the Islamic scholarly culture in his empire, founding libraries and attracting intellectuals. His journey was the ultimate advertisement, proclaiming Mali as a land of unimaginable wealth and pious sophistication. Historians still argue whether Mansa Musa's legendary wealth was a unique historical moment tied to his personal rule and particularly rich gold yields, or whether it was a more sustained phenomenon representative of Mali's economic power over centuries. Was he the exception, or the spectacular pinnacle of a norm? The chroniclers or suggests the former, but the enduring strength of the Trans-Saharan trade for centuries after suggests the deep wells of gold were a constant. Regardless, the story serves a purpose for you, a merchant sitting in Jen. It confirms the value of what you have in your pouches. It reminds you that the gold dust you just earned is part of a river of wealth so powerful it once flooded the other side of the world. You are not just a trader. You are a tiny, vital capillary in the circulatory system of an empire that could, on a whim, give away a fortune and still need to borrow a few dinars for the trip home. The story of Mansa Musa is a glittering peak, but for every king who floods a market with gold, there are 10,000 unknown souls whose stories are written in dust and silence. As the awe of the marketplace fades and you prepare your own northbound caravan, the darker foundations of this entire enterprise come into focus. The trade was peaceful in its transactions, but its infrastructure was built on profound human suffering. The desert demanded a toll not just in gold, but in flesh. You see them everywhere, now that you know to look. The enslaved porters who haul water and unload camels, their backs glistening with sweat, their eyes fixed on the ground. They are the true engines, performing the brutal, uncelebrated labor that makes the merchant's journey possible. Many were captured in raids south of the savannah, victims of internecine wars fueled, in part, by the demand for slaves from the north. The Trans-Saharan slave trade was the grim counterpart to the trade in salt and gold. Historians widely accept that over centuries, more people may have been transported across the desert as slaves than gold was carried north. They were marched in chains or ropes, a forced crossing where thirst and exhaustion claimed countless lives. Those who survived were sold in markets from Marrakesh to Cairo, their fates a world away from their homes. Their blood and sweat literally watered the roots of the date palms in the oases where you rested. Your own caravan likely includes them. They are the ones who rise first to kindle the fires from scarce, precious brush, who dig for water at dry wells, who bury the bodies of those who don't make it. Their suffering is a quiet, constant undercurrent to the merchant's grand adventure. You have endured the desert as a challenge, they endure it as a sentence. And the salt you traded? In the mines of Tagaza, it was almost certainly mined by slaves or condemned prisoners, men for whom the blinding white city was not a commercial wonder but a life sentence of slow, grinding death. But the desert's toll wasn't reserved for the enslaved. It took its share from the free merchants, too. For every success story like the one you hope to become, there were countless tragedies. A caravan vanishes, swallowed by a sandstorm or massacred by raiders, leaving only whispers and a debt back home. A merchant bets his entire fortune on one trip, only to have a load of salt crack and devalue, or to arrive and find the gold market depressed. He returns north not with wealth, but with a story of loss, slipping from the merchant class into poverty or debt bondage. The desert is the ultimate capitalist, offering astronomical returns and total ruin with the same indifferent face. Historians still argue whether the Trans-Saharan trade primarily enriched a small, elite class of merchants and rulers, creating stark inequality, or whether its benefits trickled down broadly through taxes, employment, and the diffusion of goods. The opulent palaces of Moroccan sultans and Malian mansars suggest the former, while the vibrant, multi-class markets suggest a sliver of the latter. But the bones left in the dunes argue most eloquently of all. Now, for a lesser-known, somber detail of this toll, the graves. The desert routes are littered with them, though you rarely see them. They are not marked with stone. The traditional practice was often a simple, respectful burial in the sand itself. The body would be washed if water could be spared, wrapped in a simple shroud, and placed in a shallow grave, often with a few stones placed atop to discourage scavengers. Then the caravan would move on. The shifting sands would do the rest, erasing the site within seasons. These unmarked graves are the true monuments of the trade. A merchant from Tlemcen, a salt miner from Tagaza, an enslaved woman from the forests of the south, all reduced to anonymous silence beneath the very dunes that ended their journey. Their dreams of wealth, freedom, or simply returning home, dissolved into the Saharan vastness. As you check the ties on your gold-laden saddlebags, the weight feels different. It is not just the mass of precious metal. It is the counterweight to all that loss. It represents a successful gamble where so many others lost. The system you are part of is magnificent in its scale and its cultural achievements, but it is also ruthless. It required sacrifice at every level: the miner's health, the porter's freedom, the merchant's nerve, and often, their lives. The peaceful trade was built on a foundation of quiet, accepted violence. The violence of extraction, of capture, of the desert's own indifference. You carry your gold north, but the desert keeps its own ledger, written in the bones you'll never see. Your gold is a comforting, heavy secret as the northbound caravan reforms. The journey back is the same desert, but the psychology is different. You are returning, not venturing. The threat is now behind you, the prize secured. Yet, as you retrace your steps, past the haunting white ruins of Tagaza, through the vast silence of the Majabat al-Kubra, to the final relief of Sijilmas's gates, a quiet realization settles in. This system, this mighty, centuries-old rhythm of crossing, feels less like an eternal law and more like a grand, fragile machine. And even from your vantage point in its heyday, you might sense the distant tremors of its eventual end. The first crack in the monolith is not a desert storm, but a sea breeze. For centuries, the Sahara was the only viable corridor between the gold of West Africa and the markets of Europe and the Middle East. But by the 15th century, a new type of vessel appears on the horizon, the Portuguese caravel. These stout, nimble ships begin creeping down the West African coast, probing past Cape Bojador, which was once the terrifying edge of the known world. At first, they are after gold, too, but they find something else first, a source of slaves and other goods that doesn't require a 3-month desert crossing. The widely accepted historical fact is that the opening of maritime routes by European powers, starting with Portugal, provided an alternative, cheaper, and faster conduit for goods. Why haul salt across a continent when you could ship bulk commodities by sea? The Atlantic world was being born, and its birth canal bypassed the Sahara entirely. This doesn't kill the Trans-Saharan trade overnight. It bleeds it. The trade in bulk goods like salt and grain becomes less competitive, but the desert routes retain advantages for a time. They are still the best path for moving certain luxury goods, fine textiles, books, high-status horses, and, crucially, for the movement of people and ideas. Pilgrims, scholars, and diplomats still prefer the established land routes. But the economic core, the massive exchange of salt for gold that powered empires, begins to shrink. The gold that once flowed inexorably north to Sijilmassa and Tunis now has a second outlet on the coast, draining the lifeblood from the desert caravans. Internal pressures mount as well. The great stabilizing empires that policed the routes and protected caravans, first Mali, then Songhai, begin to fragment under internal strife and external pressure, including invasions from Morocco. The pivotal moment comes in 1591, when a Moroccan army, armed with European firearms, crosses the Sahara and defeats the Songhai Empire at the Battle of Tondibi. The Moroccans seize Timbuktu and Gao, but they cannot hold the vast territory. The result is not a new order, but chaos. The political unity that made the great caravans safe dissolves. Banditry becomes endemic, the great funduks fall into disrepair, and the Kaaber's knowledge becomes a fading art as the caravans grow smaller and less frequent. Now, for a lesser-known, poignant detail of this decline, the obsolescence of a specialized profession. Consider the Rajal Ulma, the waterman or hydrographer of the caravans. His skill was knowing not just the location of wells, but their yield, their taste, some were brackish, and their seasonal reliability. He could find hidden seeps by the specific vegetation that grew above them. With the decline of the large caravans, who needed such exquisite, life-saving specialization, his knowledge, passed down orally for generations, became a museum piece without a museum. The desert's subtle language, so painstakingly learned, began to be forgotten, not because the wells dried up, but because the need to find them diminished. Historians still argue whether the primary cause of the Trans-Saharan trade's decline was external, the Atlantic shift, or internal, Saharan political fragmentation. Was it the Portuguese caravel or the Moroccan arquebus that struck the decisive blow? The answer is that they worked in tandem. The new sea routes siphoned off the economic rationale, while political collapse removed the security. The desert didn't become more dangerous. The world simply found a safer, cheaper way around it. The great ocean of sand was no longer the only bridge between worlds. As your own caravan trudges back into Sijilmasa, you feel the shift. The city is still bustling, but there's a new tension in the air. Talk in the Funduck is of coastal prices, of Portuguese intermediaries, of uncertain loyalties. The certainty that powered your journey. The certainty that if you could just cross the desert, a predictable and immense reward awaited, is evaporating. You will sell your gold, perhaps for the last time at such a splendid profit. The system that created Mansa Musa's legend and built the libraries of Timbuktu is running down like a slow, geologic clock. You have been part of something monumental, but you may also be witnessing its last, golden rays before the long twilight. The final gate of Sijilmasa closes behind you with a soft, definitive thud of wood and iron. The desert crossing is done, a ledger of thirst and fear settled with the weight of gold in your purse. You return to your world of cities and seas, of ledgers written in ink, not sand. The caravan disbands, the camels let back to their nomadic herds, the Kabe fading into the crowd, his purpose fulfilled. The great machine of the trade has completed one more cycle, with you inside it. But as the immediacy of the journey fades, a quieter question remains: what did it all leave behind? When the last camel train grew small on the horizon and the desert winds finally stilled, what echoes lingered in the sand? The most visible legacies are the cities themselves, now slumbering in a different way. Sijilmasa, once a throbbing gateway, would eventually be abandoned to the sands, its mud brick walls melting back into the earth. Tagaza, the white inferno, was simply left to the glare, its salt houses slowly dissolving under rare rains. But others, like Jen and Timbuktu, persisted, their grandeur softening but never vanishing. The great mosque of Jen still rises, rebuilt in the same ancient style every generation, a living memory in clay. The private libraries of Timbuktu, though threatened by time and conflict, survived, their manuscripts a testament to the scholarly network the caravans wove. These places are not ruins, they are anchors, holding fast to an identity forged in the age of salt and gold. Then there are the quieter, deeper imprints. Genetic trails were laid down across the Sahara, a slow mingling of peoples from the Mediterranean coast and the Sahel, visible in faces and family lines from Mauritania to Sudan. Linguistic traces linger, loanwords for trade goods, weights, and concepts that jumped from Arabic into Songhai, from Berber into Hausa. The cultural practices that traveled, the specific styles of embroidery, the intricate silver jewelry of the Tuareg, the tea ceremonies that arrived from the north and became a sacred ritual of hospitality in the desert itself. The desert was not a barrier, but a blender, and its contents were forever changed. And what of the idea of the journey itself? The concept of the Sahara as a bridge, not a barrier, was the trade's greatest intellectual gift. It created a mental map that connected the Niger River to the Nile, the forests of Guinea to the markets of Marrakesh. This map outlasted the trade. It fueled later explorations, informed colonial and post-colonial ambitions, and remains the bedrock of a Pan-African consciousness that looks beyond the desert's daunting expanse to see historical connection. The widely accepted historical fact is that the Trans-Saharan trade created the first truly intercontinental economic and cultural system in Africa, predating and paralleling the Silk Road. It proved that the continent could talk to itself across its most formidable interior. Now, for a final, gentle detail of this legacy, the path itself. The caravan routes, precise in their necessity, have mostly vanished, erased by the dunes' endless migration. But in a few places, in certain rocky plains or stable valleys, you can still find them. Not as paved roads, but as feel, as instinct. A modern Tuareg guide, taking a satellite GPS unit from his pack, might still point to a barely perceptible dip in the ground, a scatter of stones slightly darker than the rest, and say, "This is the way. This is where the salt caravans passed." The knowledge became folklore, then instinct, a ghost in the landscape. The desert remembers the weight of 1,000 footsteps, even if it no longer shows the track. Historians still argue whether the legacy is primarily one of glorious cultural fusion or of a foundational inequality, the extraction of southern gold and human beings to fuel northern and Mediterranean wealth, a dynamic that some see echoing in later economic relationships. Was it a partnership of equals, or an early chapter in a long story of imbalance? The salt and the gold sat balanced on a scale in Gen, but the scales of history are harder to read. You unpack your bags in your home, far from the desert's edge. The gold is stored away, to be used or invested. The fine sand that infiltrated every seam of your clothing is finally brushed out for the last time. But something remains. A certain way of squinting at a distant horizon. A patience for long, monotonous tasks. A memory of the profound, humming silence under a blanket of stars so thick it felt like drowning in diamonds. You crossed an ocean that no longer needs crossing. You were a single, tiny stitch in a vast, fraying tapestry. And though the pattern may be hard to see from up close, it was there. It connected worlds. It changed them. And for a moment, in the sway of a camel's gait and the gleam of a salt slab in the sun, you were part of it. And so, the great, slow rhythm of the caravans fades, like the last vibration of a bell heard across a vast plain. The urgency of trade, the sharp fear of bandits, the desperate craving for water, all these soften and recede, absorbed back into the immense, patient silence of the desert from which they sprang. The figures of merchants and miners, guides and slaves, grow translucent, their outlines blurring into the gold of the dunes and the deep blue of the twilight sky. The markets fall quiet, their voices becoming a whisper of wind through ancient archways. The salt, the gold, the camels, all settle, grain by grain, into the long story of the earth. You are left not with the clamor of the journey, but with its afterimage, a sense of scale so grand it becomes peaceful. Human endeavors, however bold, are but temporary currents in these deep, geologic seas of sand. They rise, they flow with great purpose and noise, and then they subside, leaving behind not emptiness, but a changed landscape, a well where there was none, a story passed down, a gene in a bloodstream, a belief carried forward. The desert allowed the passage, witnessed the struggle, and now holds the memory, gentle and absolute. The tension in your own shoulders, which you perhaps didn't even notice had gathered as we traveled those hard miles, can now release. The imagined heat cools. The weight of the fictional gold in your pocket lightens, turning back into a thought, a story. You are safe, you are still, you are here. The Sahara is far away, a dream of a desert, vast and silent under a bowl of stars. Its history is complete for tonight, a tale told in full. Let your breath slow to match the long, slow winds that sculpt the dunes over centuries. There is no more to carry, no more distance to cross. Only the soft, dark quiet, and the reassuring weight of your own blankets. Let the sand of that story drift over you now, a gentle, covering peace. Sleep deeply. The journey is over.